Hello, everyone, and welcome to Slash Film Daily for Thursday, May 27th, 2021. On today's episode of the show, we're going to be talking about the latest film and TV news. My name is Ben Pearson. I'm the senior writer at slashfilm.com, and I'm joined on today's episode by Slash Film writer Chris Evangelista.
Hello.
So, Chris, I know that I promised to the audience yesterday, the listeners, that we were going to have a water cooler episode. I think that has actually been pushed to next week, so sorry about that. Sometimes we don't get what we want. So let's talk about some news stuff, Chris, because that's what we're here to do today. Craven the Hunter, the new Sony / Marvel movie that is in development, has found a lead actor, and that actor is Aaron Taylor Johnson. He has been cast as the title character, Kraven the Hunter, who in the pages of Marvel Comics is one of these notorious villains who basically is a maniacal hunter who becomes obsessed with the idea of tracking down Spider-Man. He sort of gets it in his mind that capturing Spider-Man would prove to everybody that he's the greatest hunter in the entire world. And he uses this serum that gives him super strength, and I think it slows down his aging process as well. So yeah, we don't know if Tom Holland's Spider-Man is actually going to show up in this movie. I think there's been some back and forth about that. We know that J.C. Shandor, the director of movies like Triple Frontier and All Is Lost, is going to be directing this. Chris, what do you think about Aaron Taylor Johnson in the role of Craven the Hunter?
Well, first I should preface this by saying I don't really care about Craven the Hunter, and I feel like Sony is severely overestimating their Spider-Man universe, whatever they're going to call it. What are they calling it? I don't even remember.
I think they're calling it like Sony's universe of Marvel characters or something.
Wow,
that is
what
like
a catchy name.
Yeah. Yes.
Like obviously Venom was a huge hit, but people, I feel like everyone, even if you don't read comics, knows at least who Venom is just through like osmosis, pop culture osmosis. I feel like less people know about Craven the Hunter and also Morbius, which is the other movie they're doing. So I kind of feel like Sony is going to be in for a rude awakening. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe both of these films are going to be huge blockbusters. Anyway, Aaron Taylor Johnson, he's fine, I guess. I have to admit, for a long time, he was like a really boring actor. Like I thought he was just a boring actor in general. And then I saw him in Nocturnal Animals, and he was like shockingly good in that. And then I thought he was a lot of fun in Tenet, where he shows up and he has this really thick, like, I don't know if it's a Cockney accent or whatever it is. It's a very thick accent, and he's talking about temporal pincer movements. So, I don't have anything against him playing this. I feel like they probably could have done better, but I'm sure he'll do something with the role. Hopefully, I guess this is the kind of role he can sort of have fun with.
Yeah, he's done some comic book stuff before. If you remember, in 2010, he was the title character in Kick-Ass, and of course, he played Quicksilver in Avengers: Age of Ultron, which I honestly completely forgot about. Until I was writing the article about this, I was like, oh yeah, even though WandaVision just came on Disney Plus, because he wasn't in that, it was like the Quicksilver from the different universe. I just completely forgot about Aaron Taylor Johnson's version, and I think that version of that iteration of that character was not like especially well liked by the public. But yeah, man, what do you think about J.C. Shandor directing this? It's kind of a weird pick for him. He seems to be, his previous works, to me anyway, have all seemed like sort of muscular little like movies for adults kind of, and this seems like a weird step for him.
Yeah, I really don't know because I loved both All Is Lost, which is this movie only Robert Redford, and he's lost at sea and there's almost like no dialogue, and I really liked A Most Violent Year, and both of those are very, like you said, they're very adult movies. They're very slowly paced, and but then I guess Triple Frontier was an action movie, so maybe he wants to do action. I don't know, but I liked All Is Lost and A Most Violent Year a lot more than Triple Frontier. So I don't know how excited that gets me for him doing more action. Like I'd rather he do more character based stuff. Maybe Craven the Hunter is going to be a very slow-paced character drama, and there will be no action at all.
That would be pretty incredible. I really hope they do that. Real quick, you were talking about Venom and that being like a popular character sort of before that movie came around. When you were growing up, do you remember people, this is like in the era before comic book movies were like a super big, dominant force in pop culture. Do you remember people wearing like Venom shirts, when you were in school, like elementary school, all the way through to, I don't know, high school or something?
I definitely remember people knowing who Venom was. Like I wasn't like an avid comic book reader, but even I think I had like one Spider-Man comic and it had Venom in it. So I feel like, especially in the, I was born in the 80s. I grew up in the 90s primarily. And I feel like the 90s was like the era of Venom because it was a very 90s character. It's Spider-Man, but extreme. And that's like a very 90s thing.
Okay. I was wondering if that was limited to the area where I grew up. And it sounds like that was more of a nationwide, everybody had Venom fever back then. So,
but I don't remember ever seeing a single fucking person wearing a Craven the Hunter shirt. So
right.
I don't know.
I remember him showing up in the Spider-Man animated series that I really enjoyed watching in the 90s, but that's basically as far as my Craven the Hunter knowledge goes. So yeah, I'll be curious to see what Aaron Taylor Johnson does with this role. Let's talk about another piece of superhero-related content casting, and that is the latest addition to Marvel Studios' Secret Invasion, which is the upcoming Disney Plus show. Chris, who has joined that project?
Christopher Mcdonald, who's probably best known for playing Shooter McGavin in Happy Gilmore, but he's in a lot of things. He's a great character actor who just pops up in many, many things. He was in Requiem for a Dream, and he had a role on The Sopranos, and he was on Quiz Show, which is another Robert Redford movie. Big Robert Redford episode today. So he's joining the Secret Invasion series. We don't know who he's playing. It's said that the character he's playing was invented for the series, so he's not going to be playing like a character from the comics, but he could be like a Skrull or whatever, one of those aliens. He could be anything really.
Yeah, so this is a show that has, just in case people, understandably might get some of these show names confused. Secret Invasion is the show that stars Samuel L. Jackson. It has him coming back to play Nick Fury, and Ben Mendelsohn is coming back from reprising his role from Captain Marvel. Olivia Colman, Amelia Clarke, Kingsley Ben-Adir, and somebody named Killian Scott, whose work I'm not super familiar with, are all the other additions to this cast so far. So yeah, it's building out a good cast. Chris, are you surprised to see Christopher Macdonald here? Because I primarily do know him as Shooter McGavin from Happy Gilmore, but it sounds like you have more of a sort of wide-ranging relationship with his work. I guess jumping off of that and knowing, as you said, that he's a great character actor, are you surprised that he would be in a Marvel project?
No, I mean, I'm happy for him. Thank you, Christopher McDonald. I'm glad you're getting the work. And like I said, he's a very good character actor. Like, I'm sure he won't have like a huge part, but I could easily see him as like some bureaucrat. Like maybe he works for SWORD or whatever that organization is called. Like he seems like the type of actor who could easily play like a smarmy guy in a suit. Like he'd be very good for that.
Man, think about how much better. I mean, I guess this is like me throwing shade at the guy who played the army guy in the suit in WandaVision, but think about how much better that show would have been if Christopher McDonald was in that role.
Yeah, that character's you can't remember that character's name. He was so boring. But if Christopher McDonald was playing him, we'd remember his name.
Yeah, exactly. All right. So our next item here involves a new Evil Dead movie. I feel like a new Evil Dead movie is something that the internet at large has been talking about since, I don't know, like the mid 90s or something. But now it sounds like it's actually happening. Chris, what's going on with it?
Yes. So for years now, Sam Raimi and Bruce Campbell, the two driving forces behind the original Evil Dead series, have been teasing, returning to the franchise. And there was a reboot / remake, whatever you want to call it, that they like executive produced, but it was like a whole new story. Well, I guess it's kind of the same story, but new characters. But for a long time, they were sort of talking about bringing back Bruce Campbell's character, Ash. And then they sort of did that with the series Ash versus Evil Dead. And it wasn't clear whether or not the Evil Dead movie series would continue. But now it is, and it's called Evil Dead Rise. And we knew this was coming, but we now have more details about it. We already knew that Lee Cronin, who directed a very good Irish horror movie called The Hole in the Ground, was going to direct it. And there were rumors, these were unconfirmed rumors, that unlike the previous Evil Dead movies, which almost entirely take place in the woods, or in the case of Army of Darkness, in the past, this one is going to be set in a city, and specifically probably like a skyscraper, which gives the title sort of like a pun sort of thing, because it's both, Evil Dead Rise, as in they're rising from the grave, and also they're in a tall building that's rising into the sky. So the plot is two estranged sisters have their reunion cut short by the rise of flesh-possessing demons, thrusting them into a primal battle for survival as they face the most nightmarish version of family imaginable. And from the looks of things, this is going to be like all new characters. Like Bruce Campbell, even though he's executive producing, he's probably not going to be in the movie as Ash again. It's like a whole new generation of people dealing with the Evil Dead.
Okay, so I have to ask you, and I think I already know the answer, but like, isn't it weird that, like you mentioned, the identity of the Evil Dead has been, cabin in the woods kind of horror stuff, and specifically associated with Bruce Campbell. And so this new movie is not going to have Bruce Campbell in it, and it's not going to be set in the woods. Like, at what point is it no longer an Evil Dead thing, especially if it has brand new characters? Why wouldn't you just make a completely new story?
Well, I mean, they need that name recognition, first of all. That's why they're doing it. But beyond that, I feel like the Bruce Campbell era had a somewhat good conclusion with Ash versus Evil Dead. And I kind of like the idea of taking it out of the wood, just because that's something, we haven't seen before. And at this point, you got to remember that when the original Evil Dead came out in 1981, I think, like, cabin in the woods horror movies weren't as like cliched as they are now. I mean, now we have literally a movie called Cabin in the Woods that sends all that up. So, at the time it felt like, it's this fresh, creepy thing where these people are secluded in the woods. And, you can't really do that anymore. Like, it feels like anytime someone tries to make a serious Cabin in the Woods movie now, everyone's going to immediately think of Cabin in the Woods, the movie, which is a comedy. So I feel like the idea of taking it out of the woods and putting it somewhere completely new could in theory work out really well. It could, of course, always backfire, but I really liked Lee Cronin's The Hole in the Ground. I mean, I'd be a lot more excited if, Sam Raimi was the one directing it, but I get, he's directing Doctor Strange 2, whatever, Multiverse of Madness. And he hasn't made like a horror movie since, I think, Drag Me to Hell, which came out a long time ago.
Yeah, that was like 2009, I think.
Yeah. So, I'd be a lot more excited if he were directing it, but, he's involved as a producer. He apparently handpicked Lee Cronin to direct this, so he's, he has some input there. So I'm definitely willing to give this a chance.
What are the odds that this turns? Well, I'm not going to ask you for the odds, Chris, but I'll just say I'm glad that you're optimistic about this. And the downside in my mind for this, the comparable example that comes to mind immediately is Predator 2.
I was thinking that too. Yeah.
Okay.
Well,
yes.
I want to add that I think Predator 2 has its charms. It's not as good as the first movie, but I kind of like, some of it. I like that the Predator is in the city and he's targeting gangs and stuff like that. It's a cool idea in theory.
It's been a long time since I've seen that one.
I feel like if you rewatched it now, you'd be like, this is a lot better, I think, because we took those movies for granted when they came out.
Yeah.
We didn't realize that there would be an era where we don't get trashy Hollywood movies anymore. We get just constant reboots and superhero movies. I feel like a lot of times, like, movies I watched back in the day and was like, this stinks. I revisit it now and I'm like, God damn it. I wish they were making movies like this again.
Right. All right. So our last item here involves our favorite person, Zack Snyder. We've talked a lot about Zack Snyder over the past few months, and he's still doing interviews. So I feel like we still have to talk about the stuff that he's talking about. So his new movie is called Army of the Dead. It's out on Netflix right now. But in a recent podcast episode, he talked about how he still wants to make an adaptation of The Dark Knight Returns, which is this 4-issue comic miniseries from 1986 that was written and illustrated by Frank Miller. It's this really famous Batman comic series. And that comic series has already been a massive influence on Zack Snyder as a storyteller. Like several images directly from that miniseries have already been mined by him and inserted into movies like Batman versus Superman, Dawn of Justice. He says that somebody told him when he was making Batman versus Superman that he had already put too much of The Dark Knight Returns into that movie, and he wouldn't be able to adapt The Dark Knight Returns. And he said, I was like, I haven't, I promise you. So he still thinks that that there is a world in which he would potentially be able to direct a straight ahead adaptation of The Dark Knight Returns. He said that it would not, he would not hire Ben Affleck and or Henry Cavill back to reprise their roles as Batman and Superman in that project, should it ever actually come to fruition. He said, I think it would just be its own thing. I would just do it 100% Watchmen style, really frame accurate, really do it. I don't think it would be that expensive, to be honest. I don't think so. It's pretty gritty. The dialogue in there is just incredible. The voiceover in that is Frank Miller at his best. So, Chris, I feel like on one hand, it's a little ridiculous to think that Warner Brothers would want to work with Zack Snyder again after all of this Justice League brouhaha. But the existence of the Joaquin Phoenix movie Joker sort of opens up the idea that like DC is interested in making these sort of one-off movies. So like, what do you think about I'm like very curious to see what you say about this. What do you think about Zack Snyder potentially directing a Dark Knight Returns movie?
I think we don't need this at this point. I think The Dark Knight Returns has been, mined for content to death at this point. I mean, I even think there was like an animated version of the movie too. So, almost every Batman movie pulls something from The Dark Knight Returns or The Killing Joke. Those are the two. Every time there's a new Batman movie, whoever's making the movie, when they're like, what comics did you read? They always say The Dark Knight Returns and The Killing Joke. And those stories, they were great for the time. They broke barriers. They took Batman to really exciting places, but that was like 35 years ago. Yeah. And I would love, I like Batman a lot. When I was a kid, I loved Batman. Batman was a big deal to me. As I got older, I sort of, I don't want to say grew out of it, but I just don't like it as much. But I would, I feel like the era of dark, gritty, violent, fascist Batman has been explored so many times. And I'm interested in the new Batman movie. I think it looks really cool. The Batman they're calling it. Mm-hmm. But I would love like a fun Batman movie. Like I feel like, I feel like you can. There's so many different versions of Batman, and the only thing we ever get in live action movies is the dark, violent one. And I would love to see something different.
Yeah, I fully agree with that. And I feel like, even the new animated series that we talked about on a few episodes ago, where J.J. Abrams and Matt Reeves and Bruce Timm are going to be involved in that. The image that they released, the sort of like teaser image for that, made it seem like it's going to be another sort of dark and gritty kind of thing. And even like Batman, the animated series, that had some humor in it, but it was kind of like, it was like a, stylistically really influenced by film noir and art deco and all these things that are, a little bit more serious. And that was like part of the big appeal of that show, was like, it was more adult and took its story seriously and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I would love for there to just be, like I was just talking about, the existence of Joker and like DC sort of widening its parameters a little bit and letting filmmakers make these sort of one-off things. I would love there to be like multiple Batmen operating at the same time, because I know that Robert Pattinson has signed a multi-movie deal where he's going to be playing that character for probably several movies. I don't know exactly what the terms of his contract are, but I would love for them to just like, a year from now, 2 years from now, announce that somebody else is going to make a Batman movie that's going to completely stand alone and just be like, like a throwback to the Adam West days, just like completely goofy, and make it in live action. Because I feel like there's been a lot of like the goofiest Batman stuff in recent memory has probably been animated. So the live action thing, I feel like would make a big statement that like it's okay for the world to accept a Batman that isn't, super gravelly. but yeah, I think
just let him have fun. Let Batman dance again. That's what we want. We want to see him do the Batusi.
Indeed. All right. So I would genuinely love that. If like, what if Robert Pattinson's Batman does that? Like, there might be some sort of tonal clash there. But
I really want him to go like. He seems like the actor who would do that. The actor who'd be like, I'm going to do something weird with this. And that's what I want to see, because,
Yeah. All right. So, we've had this back and forth about the water cooler. Like I said, I don't think we're going to do it this week at all. So I think tomorrow, depending on how much news comes out, we may try to do sort of a mailbag centric episode. We may throw a couple news things in here or there. So if you guys have any mailbag topics that you want us to address, now is the time to squeeze those in sort of at the last second, and maybe we'll talk about them on tomorrow's episode of the show. So you can send that along with your feedback, questions, comments, and concerns to us at peter@slashfilm.com. And I encourage everybody to do that if you have any questions or anything. Make sure to leave your name and general geographic location in case we mention your email on the air. You can find more of all the stories that we talked about at slashfilm.com and linked inside the show notes of this episode. This show is published every weekday, bringing you the most exciting news from the world of movies and TV, as well as deeper dives into the great features you can find on the site. You can subscribe to the show basically wherever you get your podcasts. Don't forget to rate and review the show on Apple Podcasts. Tell your friends, spread the word. Thank you all for listening, and we will talk to you tomorrow.